Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Re-Engaging the Black Community with Law, hosted by Claudine Adeyemi, founder of Career Ear. We're also really excited to be joined by some amazing panelists, including Chidi and Kem. We are expecting one more speaker, but they will join us shortly. Claudine, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Jordan. And it's a pleasure to be here. I was actually at an in-person event this morning, so it's a shame I can't say lovely to see you all, but I'm sure that, that there's plenty of people engaged in this session today and excited about the discussion that we're going to have today. So just to start off with, my name's Claudine Adeyemi. I am the founder and CEO of Career Ear. Career Ear is a online platform that aims to support people from underserved communities into employment, into training, and to have career confidence. And that's all driven by technology. My background, however, is law. So I trained and practiced for 6 or 7 years at Mishcon Durea. And so I've been roped in to speak to some current lawyers about the state of the legal sector and careers in law, as well as the impact and, I guess, relationship with the law and our community. So as Jordan mentioned, on screen, as you can see, I'm joined by Chidi Onyeche, who is an associate at Latham and Watkins. And I'm also joined by Ihenaho, who's a partner at Latham and Watkins. This is not the Latham and Watkins show. It's a great firm, but there are other firms out there as well. And the way that we're going to run today's session is we're going to have a chat with Chidi and Kem and learn a bit about their journeys in terms of the career they have so far and their perspectives on the sector. And then, as has been mentioned, touching on that piece around how that kind of that relationship with the community. So I think the best way to do it is to kind of just get started with questions, and then as we go, we can kind of do those introductions, and hopefully we're joined as well by Hauwa. So to start with, just love to hear a little bit about your initial attraction to a career in law. Chidi, do you want to start and introduce yourself at the same time?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Claudine, and also to BYP for having us on this panel. As Claudine said, it isn't the Latham show, but there might be a couple of shameless plugs. So for those who may not know, my name is Chidi Onyeche. I'm a third-year associate at Latham and Watkins. I started at the firm and I trained at the firm, so I've been here for 5 years, but I've only been qualified for 3 years. I am a project finance and development lawyer. So for those who may not know what project finance is, if you think about roads, pipelines, airports, etc., I essentially draft the documentation for the financing of infrastructure like roads, pipelines, airports, etc. like that. I'm also the global leader of our Black Lawyers group at Latham & Watkins, which has a mission statement to recruit, retain, and promote Black talent. And it's something that we've been really focused on in the last couple of years. Obviously, everything that's happened in the last 18 months, but since its inception in 2015, we've really gone from strength to strength in our mission statement. I'm also a co-founder of a group on Instagram, which is an online platform called the Ultimate Guide Group. And that provides information and education for the Black community on careers, property, investing, finances, mental health and wellness, just to empower the Black community as much as possible. So the first thing, actually, to answer your question, Claudine, in terms of what initially attracted me to the law, as you can probably tell from my name, I'm Nigerian. And so I'm a first generation Nigerian. And so for us, there were kind of 3 main careers. You either became a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. And I can't do blood. I can't do maths. I struggle at very basic maths. So those 2 careers were kind of out of the mix for me. And so law kind of made sense in terms of what I could pursue as what was out there in terms of possibilities. For the first part, actually, and more importantly, I really realized from where I am and where I grew up is a very like inner city, local London borough. And as a result, there's a lot of police presence. There's a lot of interaction with law at a very early age. And so I really understood at a very early age how important the law was to shaping our lives and our perspective, and also how we are perceived as individuals. And so that kind of initially got me engaged with the law. And as I got to go and do a bit more in terms of my law degree and then get to commercial law, I actually really realized that I quite enjoyed it. And it made sense in terms of what it is I wanted to do for the community, both in Africa. So I do a lot of work in Africa, and also in East London. So I do a lot of pro bono work as well. And in particular as it relates to the Black community. So it actually tied in very well with what it is I wanted to do and the legacy I wanted to give to the world as a result.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing your response to that initial question. I think we also have Hauwa that is able to join us as well. Is Hauwa there? Okay, hopefully she comes in shortly. Kem, I'll hand over to you. Same question, but I guess you're a little bit further on in your journey. So I'd also like to understand if what initially attracted you has changed or evolved over time.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Claudine. Really great to be here. It's always really tough following Chidi because she's like, as you say, you can see the grey hairs. I've been doing this a little bit longer, but she's already achieved so much and is doing such an amazing job. So it's a little bit daunting, but yeah, really great to be here. Thank you, BYP. So I'm Kem Ihenaho. I am a partner at Latham and Watkins. I've been with the firm for about 7 years, kind of rolling right back. I grew up as a kid. So my dad is Nigerian, my mum is British Irish. I grew up as a kid in South East Nigeria, and then came here for senior school. And so, like Chidi, career options were limited to those three. Very similar conversations. It was just an expectation that I was going to go into, a profession. My dad was a doctor. I didn't like blood either. I was actually all right at maths, but I was attracted to the law. I had a few relatives in Nigeria who were lawyers, who I was quite close to. They were all barristers, so they spent a lot of time in court. And then I think growing up in Coventry as in the 80s and the 90s as a young Black guy was it gave me a kind of different perspective on the law and law enforcement, and it engendered an interest in criminal law, which is not obviously where I've ended up. But I had I suppose an interest in the law from an early age, which evolved. But what really attracted me, so what I do now, I am one of the leaders of our global private equity practice. Latham and Watkins, for those of you who haven't heard of it before, is one of the largest law firms in the world by revenue. Started in the US, but is now global. And London is one of the biggest offices. I think it's the second biggest office in the whole firm. I'm one of the chairs of our global private equity practice. For those of you, I'm sure you've heard of private equity, but essentially what private equity does is buy and sell companies, invest in businesses. Our clients invest all across the world. I have a number of clients that are very active in Africa, which is amazing for me because there's a personal and a professional connection that means I get to spend lots of time in Lagos and Nairobi and places like that, which is always fun. So that's what I do now. I'm also the chair of our Diversity Leadership Committee, which is a global committee at the firm that drives our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. It is a very important topic for us strategically. We want to be the most inclusive law firm in the world. It is front and center of everything that we do. And so that's great. It's a real honor and a pleasure to do that. There's lots of work to be done in that area. But as you see, I kind of shifted, I guess, from an early stage interest in law to an interest in criminal law, and actually a dawning kind of realization of actually the practice of criminal law is very different to what I kind of perhaps perceived it to be when I was kind of had an interest in it from an academic perspective. And I'd love to hear Hauwa's views on this, obviously from the CPS. But I also started to gain a real interest in business and finance, and had an opportunity to do some work experience in a commercial law firm, and just loved mergers and acquisitions, the cut and thrust of a deal. And that is what really attracted me to what I'm doing now. So it's been a bit of a journey, but
quite the
private
journey.
equity keeps me out of trouble.
Quite the journey. And you mentioned the kind of the law enforcement, you mentioned barristers in there as well, and in comes Hauwa. Hauwa, I'd love to hear if you could share a little bit about what you do and your background, but also touch on what surprised you when you entered the legal industry, if there was anything that surprised you about it.
Thanks so much, Claudine. And sorry, I've joined you all a little bit later. So just as Claudine said, I think, Kem, it's almost like we coordinated that intro, went straight into over to me. So first and foremost, to those watching, apologies, but I'm also Nigerian. So I feel like we've got all the different
apologies needed.
Bit of a Niger takeover going on here, but so I'm from Nigeria. I'm from the north of Nigeria, and I was actually born there, but moved to the UK when I was really small. And for me, my parents were very much kind of like traditional Nigerian, even African parents, obviously wanted us to all do well. But actually, they didn't really have set career paths in mind for us. Neither of my parents went into any of the traditional streams, but it was kind of that thing where it's like, study, study, study. Whatever you do, you've just got to study, and you better do well at studying. So I think when it comes to me, I ended up pursuing law because, similarly to Kem, I had a specific auntie who was a barrister in Nigeria, and she really inspired me / brainwashed me. So interestingly enough, for me, the first barrister I ever knew was a Black Nigerian woman. So then qualifying here and seeing what the profession was actually like, took me by surprise. So that's potentially, I would say, one thing. I say that's one thing that surprised me about the industry, but not at the point of entry, because I think I had all of that awareness when I was at university and studying, that firstly, women of color and generally just Black people, minorities, going into law at a high level, we didn't seem to be well represented. And then particularly trying to pursue a career at the bar, it got even worse when I'd look at it. So I think I came to that realization, and I understood that during my journey as I was pursuing law. I ended up doing criminal law, funnily enough, not necessarily because it was my favorite area of law. I was one of those ones who finished university, and I just loved so many things. I could see myself doing immigration law. I could see myself doing human rights. I could see myself doing public. I actually was never interested in corporate, I must say. And one thing is that obviously the firms, they target people who are going for the solicitor route. You can become in-house counsel do work at these firms, but at university they don't really target. It's kind of like, if you want to be a solicitor, come this way. If you want to be a barrister, go that way. And I think that's probably partly why I didn't end up going towards corporate. But one thing I found was that when I was doing work experience and when I was meeting barristers, often the ones that I would meet and the easier route in which to get experience and get exposure was going to observe criminal trials, meet criminal lawyers. And they were always so welcoming, always so down to earth. And to be completely blunt, it was just so interesting. Like, you're exposed to people at their most vulnerable time, whether it's victims and witnesses or defenders, and you see raw human behavior. And you have that opportunity to have this really direct impact. Like, after you do a trial, you're either meeting with your defendant or meeting with your victim and witness, and you see the impact that your work has had on that individual. And I think all of that really drew me towards that path. So when I was applying for pupilages, I actually applied for quite a number of different practice areas, and I ended up getting in at the CPS. And I actually thought, this is okay. I'm interested in it. I'm going to do it for about a year and then I'm going to switch. And without being corny, I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with it and I love what I do. I think the other thing that surprised me, which any criminal practitioner knows this is just how it goes. One thing that surprised me was, I would say probably, we all know that the criminal law is under-resourced, underfunded, but the volume of cases that you deal with, particularly as a junior barrister, and the way that the court listings are done, you can find yourself sort of day two after you've qualified, especially if you're a prosecutor like I am, prosecuting, having a list of about 4 or 5 trials that you received the night before. And between that night and the next morning, you've got to prepare all of those trials. You need to know who the victim is in each one, who the defendant is, what the charges are, what that witness is going to say, what the other witness is going to say, which one is going to go first, second, third. And in terms of what that's done for my short-term memory, it's brilliant. It is amazing. I can't comment on my long-term memory. But I think for me, it was always quite a stark realization that actually we're dealing with people's lives. We've got people's lives in our hands, people's futures in our hands. And the system is, you know, it needs a lot more resources to really be able to ensure that justice is served. All of us who work within it, I think, would honestly say that we're simply doing the best within the confines that we have. But I think as much as I knew that was the case, it definitely took me by surprise that it was quite as bad. You know, I never quite understood why we don't get cases way in advance, know the date that the case is going to go ahead, and the case goes ahead on that date. So I think you do need a lot of resilience, especially when you start out on this career path. You need a lot of resilience, a lot of energy, integrity, and yeah, it definitely gets better as you go along. And I still love what I'm doing. I'm still smiling. So obviously it can't be that bad.
I think it's awesome actually that we've got you from the kind of, I guess, public sector barrister, and then we've got the corporate solicitor side as well. Because actually, the next question that I wanted to ask was, if you're thinking about anyone in the audience that is considering a career in law, what your advice would be to those individuals that are pursuing those careers at the very early stages. And I think, hopefully we can kind of get a bit of a feel for that from both routes in terms of the bar and also kind of going the solicitor route. But before we go into that question, I do just have to interrupt and say, obviously my surname is Adeyemi. I am Nigerian. I am also half Jamaican. So the Caribbean is also represented in this conversation. I just wanted to flag that. And also, as we go, please do ask questions as well, because I'll pick up those questions at the end. This session is for you guys. So if you've got questions that you want to ask of Chidi, Kem and Hauwa, then please do drop those in the chat as well. But Chidi, can I go to you? What would your advice be to maybe mentees that you're working with or people that are coming into the industry?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think the main thing is, and kind of touch on what Kem and I both said, for us, we had 3 careers out of millions, right? That we were said that we need to go down. So we either need to be a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. And in 2021 and in the 21st century, for Gen Z and millennials, that is just not the case right now, right? You can do so much in terms of what it is you enjoy, what the skills that you have that you can monetize, and all of that kind of stuff. But it doesn't mean that in order for you to be a well-paid or respected individual of society, you need to be an engineer, doctor, or a lawyer. So one of the things that I really stress to my mentees and the people that I sponsor is that law is great, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed my law degree. I love the practice that I'm in, and I also really enjoy what I'm able to do for the Black community outside of my commercial, billable, quote unquote, work. But what I really struggle with is sometimes there are individuals who think that law is the way in which that they can, because they've seen very successful people who are lawyers, that is the way in which they can be also successful. And it's just not the case. And what I think is really important for the generation coming up is making sure that you get exposure as much as possible in any type of work that you want to do. And I think you do need to get exposure if you want to be a lawyer in corporate law, in immigration law, in public law, in in the bar, in law firms, in big law firms, in small law firms, in international law firms. There's so much out there. And as you get that experience, you'll be able to make a more informed decision about whether or not law is for you. I speak to a lot of people who just think that because they see me or they see somebody like Kim or Hauwa, that these are all really successful people, and so I'm going to follow their path. When actually they don't really like the law and they would prefer not to work in Africa. And there's so many different things that actually my life doesn't make sense for their life. And had I had that advice, and I really wish I did, like I'm really glad I'm in law, but I would have gone to do like look at advertising, look at marketing, look at so many other different types of careers that are out there, so that I would be able to make a decision that is incredibly informed. Thankfully, it worked out for me. But I hate to see some of my mentees who are going through this process and doing the LPC and doing all these internships. And when you ask them whether or not they actually enjoy the law, they're like, I mean, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's just a complete waste of time. Like, you have skills and you have a gift to give the world, and it might not be being a lawyer, and that's absolutely fine. And there's various other paths that you can do to be successful. So for me, exposure is actually really important, both within the law, because there are so many different ways that you can be a lawyer, but also just in general. And if you have an interest in absolutely anything, explore it. And it's kind of your gut, and whatever it is that you believe in, God, universe, spiritual, whatever it is, there's something in you that's saying, actually, like, go do that. Like, see whether or not that's your gift that you need to give to the world. And don't feel that you have to be pigeonholed and boxed in because of like your heritage or your culture, or just because you see other individuals as successful in a particular type of work.
Yeah, that completely resonates. I have so many conversations with people where I'm like, go out there and get some work experience, or speak to people and try and get your foot in the door, even if it's to then discount that path, which is kind of what happened to me. I remember doing work experience, no offense, Hauwa, with a barrister. And that was the moment I was like, this is not for me. I won't be going to the bar. But it's important to do those experiences to even figure out what you don't want to do. Hauwa, can I come to you next in terms of advice for people that might be thinking about a career as a barrister?
Definitely. And I'm going to start literally where you just left off, right? You said you did work experience with a barrister and you thought, no, this is not for me. So I often pride myself on the fact that I don't think I am like many barristers that I've come across. And one of the things that I found really difficult actually was when I was pursuing this career path is I would do work experience and I would do mini pupilages and I would go into chambers. And don't get me wrong, there are some brilliant barristers who have really, really inspired me, who have mentored me, who I've done work experience with that I thought were absolutely incredible. But there were equally others who really struggled to hold a conversation with me, who potentially just didn't really care who I was or about my background, who fit some of the unfortunate stereotypical, pale, male and stale image of a barrister. And I think that was really difficult for me because I thought, well, I want to do the work, I want to do this career path, but I don't necessarily fit into this world. And that took me a long time to sort of reconcile. And so one of the big pieces of advice I would give to people is definitely shadow and do work experience, because what you will find is that what Chambers says on its website might be completely different to how Chambers are once you're sort of through the door and once you meet the people and you interact with them. And the truth is, pupillage is so competitive that what I'm saying, everything I'm saying is kind of the ideal world. You might not really get a choice, to be honest. We get in where we can get in because it is really difficult and it is really competitive, and it's even harder for us, for those of us who are Black, for those of us who are women, for those of us who are visibly Muslim. Like, the list is endless, basically. And so I would still say do work experience and shadow barristers, but also try and find barristers that will mentor you, barristers that you can have, quote unquote, real talk with, that you can really say to them, how much do you earn at the beginning? How easy is it to get work from the clerks? How quickly will I get a big brief, because I think that helped me a lot, because I spoke to really wonderful people like Tunde Okawale at Doughty Street, Claire Van Overdyke, who's at number 5 Chambers, and they would always give me the real lowdown of what the profession is like. And also I got a sense of where I felt like I belonged. And when I ended up at CPS, like, if you want to see diversity in a Crown Court or a magistrate's court, I actually challenge you, go to the CPS room, go to where the Crown prosecutors are, because we do have a really diverse workforce. It's true that we have our own issues when it comes to sort of the more senior levels of lawyers, but it's there. And for me, I remember just feeling like, at least here I have a voice, at least here I have influence, not just on practicing the law, but also on policy and creating the law. So I think that's really important. The other thing that I would say in terms of advice is, I would also say it's really important to think about your almost like life goals. So without sounding like an auntie, sort of like when you get married, when you get in your house, when you're having your kids, but especially if you're a woman, I think at the beginning, we literally just pursue our passions quite often. We're just like, I'm interested in this, I want to do this. But actually, a lot of women I know who are self-employed barristers, remember, you don't get any maternity pay. You're self-employed. When you're not working, you're not earning at all. Whereas working in the public sector, obviously maternity pay is fantastic. Also, if you want to get on the property ladder, if you're self-employed, I can't remember how many years of your pay that you need to show, but it's a number of years. And if you're self-employed, it's quite hard to prove that. So I think my two little bits would just be meet people, do some shadowing, and also think about your long-term life goals.
Nice. Okay. And Kem, I just want to come to you on this, but particularly thinking about how, I guess, lawyers can, get in, but also thinking about the ones who are in and might be engaging in the session, how they can get on, particularly as Black lawyers.
Yeah, sure. No, that's great. Thanks, Claudine. And look, I completely agree with what Hauwa and Chidi said. I think one of the challenges that I think people face when they look at the industry is the diversity of roles within it. You've got public sector, private sector, big law firms, small law firms. I mean, there is, so the law is such a diverse range of different kinds of careers. So how do you work out actually what will interest you, where you see your career progressing? And so thankfully, there is a lot of information out there that can help you kind of digest all of that, on the internet. The organizations like RARE, the Black Solicitors Network, there are lots of places to go and search for help and information, as well as getting work experience and mentorship, which has certainly been really important in my career, and I think is really helpful. I suppose the only thing I would add to the first question is, don't be discouraged if you can't get legal work experience. It is really hard to get it. I really struggle to get it. Any work experience is relevant. I often, I interview junior lawyers, grads a lot. And actually what I love to hear is them talk about the other work experience they have, and actually talk about how that is relevant potentially to the job of a lawyer. If you've worked in McDonald's dealing with difficult customers on a Friday night, you have customer service skills. You can deal with difficult clients who are stressed about their transaction or haven't had enough sleep. So, any work experience is relevant. You've just got to link what you've done to, the job or the career that you're aspiring to. So don't be discouraged if you can't get career in law. Any work experience is relevant, but you've got to make the link. For those who are already in the industry, and want to progress, it's somewhat dependent, obviously, as to where they want to end up. But I think, finding mentors is really, really important. More than one, and they don't have to be within the organization that you're in. They don't have to be within the team that you're working in. But people that can share their experiences. They don't have to have the same background as you. But people that can share their experiences and help you navigate the path. You might not want to follow in their footsteps, but you will learn from the good stuff they've done, the bad stuff they've done. That will inform your own kind of journey. So I think finding mentors, and I have to say, 9 times out of 10, there are lots of busy people in law, but people mentors get a lot out of it. I get a huge amount out of it. It's incredibly rewarding to, help people navigate their careers, the journey, impart some of the experience that we have. So don't be afraid to ask, I'd say, for mentors, and look for them. They don't necessarily even need to be in your industry, but that, I think, is really important to help people navigate through their careers and progress.
Kemma, I think you might have a very busy LinkedIn after this session with that offer. Okay, so I think I know there's a few questions from the audience now in terms of questions about getting into law and getting on. But I do just want to kind of make sure that we do cover off the other side in terms of the relationship between law, the legal profession, and our community. And I think particularly given the events over the past few years in particular, but we know, it's been going on for decades and decades and decades. But if we think about the systemic racism that we have from from a law enforcement perspective, right the way through to ethnicity pay gaps and everything, what can we as, I say we, I'm not involved in the profession anymore, but what can lawyers be doing and thinking about, and how can we be active in making sure that the community is better protected and understands how to react and build a relationship with the law and understand the legal position that they're facing. That's an open question, so if anyone wants to take that.
I don't mind starting. I don't think as lawyers, to be honest, we do enough to engage with our local communities. Like Chidi mentioned, Latham Watkins obviously has a brilliant staff network. At CPS, we also have a BAME Black and Minority Ethnic staff network. I've run the mentoring program on there for a long time. I chair the Muslim network. Through our staff networks, we do a lot of community engagement, and we do go out into the community and we talk to them. Also, I think because at the CPS, we do criminal law, which obviously is an area of great interest to the public. We do public scrutiny panels where members of the public can actually sit with our lawyers and our team and kind of dissect through big cases, topical cases, what happened, and get some feedback on that. So those are some opportunities. But I actually think that as lawyers, we need to almost take a multidisciplinary approach. I think we need to work more with activists, with academics, to put on events, to put on talks, to engage the community a bit more on a level that the community can understand. I actually think, and this is a big critique of us as lawyers, I think so often lawyers get so used to working and talking on this level that they forget how to bring it down to engage with the layperson, even though the work that we're doing impacts the layperson. So I think definitely and there are a number of people who are working on brilliant initiatives to actually, for example, have podcasts that people can listen to, or for example, Urban Lawyer, they do they do career fairs, but they also do events for people who aren't interested in getting into the law, but are interested in understanding the law a bit more. Of course, the corporate firms do career events. Again, I know that's aimed at people who want to be lawyers, but often they sometimes break down concepts like what is commercial awareness, for example. So I think it's about us as lawyers working better together. I think us as Black lawyers as well. And I'll keep this quick because I know there's a couple of questions, but one of the things that I found when it comes to sort of some of my counterparts from different backgrounds, I have found that sometimes, unfortunately, they might represent Black people in court, they might deal with cases that impact the Black community, but put a young Black person in front of them who's asking normal questions. They're almost like socially awkward. They don't know how to talk to you, how to deal with you. And so I actually think that as Black lawyers, we have this unique ability to be able to talk to our own community. I think there's some great grassroots initiatives coming through, but I don't think we've yet sort of come together well enough to be able to provide a really comprehensive, accessible way that our community can really access the law. So I personally think it's still a work in progress.
Thanks, Hauwa. And Chidi, you've done quite a lot of pro bono work as well, and have spoken already.
Yeah.
You mentioned kind of the work that you do to support the Black community. Can you share a little bit more on that so you can inspire others as to what they could be doing or thinking about doing?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I actually agree with Hauwa on this point, that I think that for a very long time, and in particular with certain firms and certain individuals, that you end up like being very engrossed in the work that you do. So sometimes you just don't even think about, not to say that you don't care about it, but you just, because you're so engrossed in the work that you're doing, providing a very good job to your client, you just don't think about anything else that comes into
Oh, I thought that might have been me, but I think it might be Chidi.
lawyer.
Ken, maybe I can come to you whilst Chidi's frozen.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure she'll be back in a minute. Oh. No, she's gone. Really gone this time. I'm sure she'll be back.
Yeah, that new age, isn't it?
I completely agree with how I think there is work to be done to increase engagement and also break it down. I think it is a fair kind of critique that we often talk in kind of too much legal speak, and oftentimes you just need to kind of break things down into more kind of understandable kind of language and just make the industry more accessible. I mean, I think from and I think this is what Chidi was going to go on to talk about, from a sitting in kind of big law and commercial law. One kind of obvious way that we find to engage with the broader community is through pro bono. I mean, we do a tremendous amount within our law firm, and so do many other firms. I mean, I think in 2020 we recorded about 260,000 hours collectively of pro bono work. It's a huge part of what we do. We actually have targets for individual lawyers to do pro bono hours per year, and that's one way that we have found of engaging, and particularly over the last year, engaging on topics of particular relevance to the community. We've been doing a lot of work with the Windrush Project and other organizations to ensure that in fact Chidi can talk to the Windrush Project because she was working on that. But there are a number of ways in which, even if your kind of day-to-day is corporate or commercial, and look, some of that engages with the community as well, obviously, where there are clients, but on a pro bono side, there's ways to engage more broadly, and that's something that's a very important part of what we do.
Thanks, Karen. Sorry, I'm not too sure when I dropped off, but I'll just quickly make it short, because I'm sure that Karen's already touched on a lot of the stuff that we've done. But as a result of everything that happened last year, there was a renewed focus within Latham and Watkins pro bono, and also within the Black Lawyers Group, to work out how we could give back our resources, because we have incredibly talented lawyers, to the Black community. So as Ken mentioned, we got involved with the Windrush scandal. So we're helping individuals that have been impacted by the Windrush scandal on a pro bono basis. We have worked with a number of grassroots startups. So from the food industry to technology, we actually worked with Colouring Tech, who put on one of the biggest tech conferences. I think it was last week. And we've been providing pro bono services to a number of different startups within those accelerators. We've worked with the Making of Black Britain project, which is a organization which is looking to pull together all the various different stories of Black British individuals from the Windrush generation prior to that up until 2021. And so that is going to launch at some point this year. So watch out for that. We also worked with a number of different organizations across the world. So we work with Nigerian individuals, so students in Nigeria who haven't got access to education, so mentoring them if they want to come into law. So we've done a lot of work with in Nigeria. We've also worked in Rwanda to help pull together and put up kind of safe houses for the orphans and generations coming after the orphans as a result of the Rwandan genocide. There is so much that we've been doing as a result of the impacts that 2020 had on the world, but in particular the Black community. So economically,
I think you're frozen again. But I think leading on from that, because it's awesome hearing about the work that you are doing, but it's interesting to me that you all still think that despite the work you're doing, more should be done. So hopefully this inspires others to kind of do more as well. Thinking through in terms of the impacts on the Black community, I think a lot of that is on a kind of individual level, some of that on a kind of systemic level as well. We do have one question that resonates with me actually, because I've heard this a lot from Kwadwo, who has asked that he's a business owner, not interested in practicing law, but wants to understand enough law to be able to set up and run his business. And I know I've been asked a lot of times, how do I, as a business owner, without much money, wanting to get started, how do I get all the legals right without paying thousands and thousands to a lawyer? Yeah, so it would be awesome to kind of hear any thoughts from Kem or maybe Hauwa on how they can go about doing that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a conundrum, right? It's something I've heard before as well. I mean, I suppose a couple of things. One is, like everything in life, there are, you can get things done at different prices. So there are, there's some work that definitely kind of makes sense to come to a Latham and Watkins, but a lot of work that doesn't. There are some quite useful kind of basic guides on the internet, actually, in certain areas a bit. I mean, obviously, I don't know quite well what the business is that you're and the specific issues you're having, but there are some kind of decent online guides on certain kind of relevant issues. Some of them on the kind of government website, Inland Revenue website, but it is a bit of a conundrum, yeah, it's one that we've seen on occasion. But yeah, I think there are certainly resources available for small businesses, but it's not easy when you've got a tight budget.
Yeah, and I'd co-sign that point around. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I just quickly add. I agreed exactly with what Ken was saying, and there's also some other organizations that provide, or at least connect you to law firms that provide pro bono support. So Trust Law is a place that you can touch base with, and I think you either need to be a charity or have earned less than £10,000 in revenue over a certain period. There are firms. There's another one called AD4 Law, I think maybe is another place that you can look at. And a lot of big companies, so Google, Barclays, etc., all have accelerator programs which allow you to kind of troubleshoot some of the problems that you have as a startup. So that might be something that you can go down, as well as using the free resources that are available online.
Yeah, and I think linked to both of those, in terms of the resources, starting with the key kind of associations for that area. So ACAS is the one for employment law, for example. If you've got queries on IP, you want to go to the Intellectual Property Office website and start there. GDPR, there's the Information Commissioner's Office. So starting from those sources, and then linked to what Chidi was saying in terms of the accelerators, most of those also have workshops covering different areas of your business, and there's usually a legal workshop as well that will kind of at least give you some of the basics in terms of those concepts, and no doubt other hacks and tips as well. Cool. Another question from the audience. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Jordan, what do you think of the new pathways into law? So legal apprenticeships, SQE, and are you aware of any apprenticeship opportunities yourself? Do Latham and Watkins have solicitor apprenticeships?
We personally don't, and Kem, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have solicitor apprenticeships, but we are aware, of course, about the SQE, and it's something like the market, we're touching base and keeping an eye on the market as to how it will play out with the various different law firms. I think it's a fantastic way to democratize and make the law a lot more accessible to individuals that may not have been able to get a training contract. So definitely would suggest that you pursue those options. I think the majority of the big four, so PwC, EY, I can't remember the other, KPMG, all have apprenticeships for you to become a qualified lawyer. So definitely would suggest that you go and look into that. There are so many different options and there's so much available. And I don't know whether or not that person who asked the question is on Instagram, but there are so many different Instagram profiles and also YouTube profiles that are looking particularly about the legal apprenticeships and also the SQE apprenticeships. In-house Potter is one that I've been able to connect with through Instagram, which might be a great way for you to like kind of get into and understand a little bit more about how it is you can become a lawyer through the apprenticeship route and also through the SQE route. And for those who don't know, SQE is the solicitor qualifying exam, which kind of removes the need for you to get a training contract. So you have 2 years worth of qualifying work experience rather than the training contract.
And what is the panel's thoughts on the SQE? It's a massive change considering how training has been done in the past. Do you kind of see it as a positive, or do you think that the jury's out? Or I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts.
I think everyone in the market is waiting to see how it actually plays out. But as a general point, it democratizes the law and makes it a hell of a lot more accessible. So I don't think it'll be weird for somebody to come out and say that this is the worst idea ever, because it does, and it also gives credit to the fact that people have got experiences from various different avenues. That it might not be a training contract, but somebody may have worked as a paralegal for 5 years, or worked as an apprentice for 6 years. And I'm not sure whether or not that experience should be discounted because it's not a 2-year training contract. And I think that's kind of where the profession was thinking in terms of introducing the SQE. But we'll see what the market says in a couple of years. But I definitely think, and I think most people would agree, that it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a step in the right direction. I think the jury is somewhat out because it's very new, right? So I think we've got to see how it's actually implemented and what impact it actually has in practice. I think a number of employers will continue to run training programs and training contracts and will want people to kind of go through those processes anyway. But no, if it helps, as Chidi says, democratize law and make it more accessible, then absolutely, I think it's a great thing. But we need to see how it's kind of implemented, I think.
And just to add, at CPS, we are offering solicitor apprenticeships for the SQE route. I think it takes 7 years, so it's a long time. Like, you have to be really committed to it, but you'll be earning whilst you're studying, etc. And we do also offer apprenticeships basically across a diverse range of professions. So some of the more corporate side of the business at CPS, we've got apprenticeships for that business route if someone wants to be an HR professional or a business management professional. And then we also have it for the solicitor pathway and the barrister pathway. I have to completely agree with Kem and Chidi in that I think it's always refreshing to see pathways into law that are more inclusive. However, one thing I would say is that the legal profession definitely has a history of levels of prejudice, kind of discriminating depending on what school you went to, where you studied with, who you trained with. I think for a lot of us in the profession, gosh, and I don't know if this is just a stereotypical thing to say, but I feel like when you work hard enough and when you really push to break down certain barriers and boundaries, you get to a point in your career where your work speaks for itself. No one is asking anymore, what school did you go to, etc., because you've essentially shown that you have integrity and skill as a lawyer. And I think that with the SQE pathway, only time will tell whether any of that prejudice is there. But I don't think that it's something that people can't overcome, because I know colleagues and I know people who, for example, they didn't go to the right university and they're barristers, or they didn't go to the right public school and they're doing well. But I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the norm. So all I would say is that pick what is right for you. If that's right for you, go for it, and just steel yourself, be ready for it. You know, don't come in sort of with the blinders on. Know that there might be challenges. It's going to be like, you're going to be a pioneer if you're one of the early ones doing it. But I personally think if it's what you want to do and it's the right route for you, 100% go for it. And that's where mentors and things come in as well, because they can support you.
I think to your point as well, in terms of at some point it will be your work that speaks for itself. I've mentored a lot of people coming into the profession and at the junior end of the profession. And in terms of that question around what did you do at the beginning to kind of really make sure that you're in a good position, and how did you tackle the diversity side of things and being a minority? And it was be bloody excellent at what you do. Like, hone your craft and be an incredible lawyer, because the more that you do that from the very beginning, the sooner you're in that position where actually your work speaks for itself. I had clients that loved me. I had partners that I had really good relationships with because I was excellent. And that's the starting point, right? I think it's also interesting that you mentioned apprenticeships taking quite a long time and being 7 years, but that's in place of going to university, doing a 3-year degree, the law school, then the 2-year training contract, right? So it's not that dissimilar. So it's amazing that there is new pathways opening up. Okay, I'm conscious of time, and we do have to wrap up. So I wonder if we can go around to each of you. And I think I really like panels and discussions that are action-oriented and practical. So if there was one key takeaway and something that you would want people to go off and do as a result of this panel, what would that be, and who would that be targeting? So whether it's someone coming in, someone that already works in the profession, non-lawyer, what's your kind of one key takeaway for them to go off and action?
I'm happy to go first on that. So I definitely, and it's kind of touched on Ken's point previously. Firstly, go check out Latham and Watkins. It's a great firm, FYI. But in case you're not completely sold on us, and you just kind of want to get more experience, a sponsor is something that is incredibly important. I think you do need to find somebody who is going to be able to sponsor you throughout your career, no matter what it is. And like I said at the beginning, I set up an Instagram platform called the Ultimate Guide Group, and we work out ways in which you can get a sponsor and get a sponsor correctly. Please avoid blasting random people on LinkedIn asking for a 5-minute or 10-minute call. It won't go down well. And we run through on our platform how best you can interact with individuals and build up an organic relationship to get sponsors and mentors in your corner. And I think no matter what career you go on into, a sponsor and a mentor is key. And I don't think any of us would be where we are without the benefit of sponsors and mentors.
Kem, can I come to you next?
Yeah, sure. And thank you again for hosting this. It's been really, really great. So dispel a myth first. You don't have to be of Nigerian origin to work at Latham and Watkins. Just to be clear, it helps, but it's not a prerequisite. But seriously, I don't think the city has ever been more open to, to hiring and helping people to progress from underrepresented backgrounds. But it's still really hard, right? But it's more open than it has ever been. So I think that's really promising. But it is definitely still really hard. It's still really competitive. If you can't get legal work experience, don't worry. Just get whatever work experience you can. And then if you have the opportunity to talk to people in the industry at interviews, at open days, think about how that experience is relevant to a career in law. And it will be, but you've got to think about it. It could be customer service. It could be problem solving, whatever it is, but start thinking about that, and I'm sure you'll be very successful.
Thanks very much, Kem, and for dispelling the myth. Hauwa?
Yeah, I'll be really quick. And actually, I've got 3 really quick ones. But the first one is just think outside the box a bit. Kind of what Kem said about the type of experience, but also where you want to work. Remember that there's public sector, there's private sector, there's big firms, there's small firms, there's the bar, there's going in-house. Just think outside the box and do some research. I think secondly, also really pursue your passions and whatever speaks to you, whatever area of law it is, like pursue that, go with that, because I think when you're passionate about it, you can do a lot more. And that even includes like, there's lots of funding opportunities if you want to do international placements, like death penalty work in the US. I did that. There's lots of funding for that kind of work. And then I think just finally, a plug for staff networks, contact staff networks as well. Because often what you find with our staff networks, whether there's a Black Lawyers Network, etc., we like to treat you guys as family. So if you're trying to get into the profession and you make a bit of an error or you approach in the wrong way, we will gently, kindly tell you and help you to do it the right way next time and give you an insight. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all very much for those gems and for joining today. My final piece would be an absolute plug for Career Ear. So please go and sign up to Career Ear if you're thinking about your first career, your next career, or if you want to give back by answering questions of people who are thinking about your industry. And with that, I'd like to thank Kem, Hauwa and Chidi, and to you all for engaging with this session. Stay tuned for all of the other BYP sessions and have fantastic weekends.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.